Oh, okay. So we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just depends on where you are and when you're tuning into this broadcast. My name is Clara Lyons-DeVaughn. I am the broker owner of Lyonsview Realty, and we provide residential, commercial for small businesses and nonprofits and property management services. And I am also an author. I'm really excited because I had the opportunity to meet our guest today several years ago through an organization called the International Black Summit. And over time, our paths have realigned, and I've had an opportunity for to work with her as my accountability partner in a book that actually several books that I'm working on. She is a phenomenal woman. She is a phenomenal author. She has accolades down the street and back. And we'll probably get into that a little bit too. But I'm just going to start by giving, I guess, a little background on why I'm doing this. I really feel like wealth comes in so many different forms. And one of the forms that wealth comes in is intellectual wealth. You know, books are just as important as speaking. They tell our stories, they put in print forever the things that are creatively going on in our mind, intellectually going on in our mind. It shares our stories with other people. And I think that they're very important to the culture. And a lot of times we don't get an opportunity to see the people behind the book, the people who are responsible for getting us this rich tapestry that we call literature. So I'm really excited today to introduce Miss Salima Marriott Gibbs. How are you doing today, Salima?
I'm wonderful today, Clara.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining today and for sharing your wonderful book, Bringing into Being Our Legacy, which is appropriate for what this broadcast is going to be about, by Miss Salima Marriott Gibbs. And I'm just going to read the back of your book for a minute, if you don't mind. It says that you were born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Her loving and supportive nuclear family included her parents, Jesse and Cordy Seiler, brothers Jesse Jr. and James, and a younger sister, Gloria. From being inspired by the spirit of her great grandmother, Eliza Fosk, F-O,
Askew.
Fosque, thank you, a midwife on the eastern shore of Virginia, to a lifetime of rewarding girlfriend and nurturing women relationships, as well as multiple challenges, emerged the adult activist. When her oldest child, Therese, entered the public schools of New York City, Salima became a parent advocate. She later embraced multiple dimensions of activism that included national and international racial justice and Black feminism. Integrating activism in government, Salima was an elected delegate to the Maryland General Assembly for 16 years before being appointed the deputy mayor of Community and Human Development of Baltimore City. Bringing into Being Our Legacy shares the story of Miss Gibbs' life and the legacies of the 16 women who were the primary influencers of her evolving adult life. Marriott's book also shares her conceptualization of a Black feminist theory from the actions and thoughts of women activists of African ancestry, beginning with the transatlantic slave ships to the 21st century and the application of the theory to African American women activists. That says a lot. That really says a lot. But I'd like for you to share a little bit about yourself, from your perspective as a woman, a mother, an author, whatever you'd like to share with our audience today.
Well, you captured it, and most of it. So let me start out with some things that are not on the back of the cover, I believe.
Mhm.
Uh, was raised in an impoverished family, meaning that we were low income. And I was born at the time that the United States was entering into World War II. So World War II was actually raging at the time of my birth. And so one of the things that are really important that I often leave out is that I grew up, I evolved in an environment of women who were working and
Mm.
participating in the defense industry. Black women. I saw Black women earning exceptional income. And I knew that because those who were closest to me were lavishing me with gifts, and they were lavish gifts. So I developed a concept early in life that women work
Okay.
and that women can be paid comparable salaries, not just during the war,
Yeah.
but forever. Now, I did not conceptualize it exactly like that as a child, of course, but it's something that I always knew. My Aunt Annie Mae, Miss Lucy, Miss Gladys were women working in the defense industry and lavishing me with quality gifts. And so that was that experience. And I had the experience of conceptualizing a role model
Mm.
before I even went to school. And so before I get into the role model, I want to say also during those early years of my life, my oldest brother, who was 9 years older than me, treated me as if I was his Head Start student. My
Mm.
brother was committed, 9 years older, to preparing me when I entered school. And in conjunction with that, he began to develop in me a positive self concept because every time we finished our lessons, he would say to me, which the family called me, Dolly, you are so smart. And
Mm.
so I internalized what my brother was saying to me. And I often say to people, and I still carry this now, I don't know when I entered school for certain if I was so smart. I knew that I was going to behave like I believe smart students behave because my brother had said that I was smart. So as a child, I didn't know it for certain, but I knew my brother said I was, and he was preparing me for school. And when I got there, that's how I was supposed to behave. And so those thoughts of my brothers happened to be the way I behaved most of my life without knowing for sure what was what. And then I was challenged by my intellect at various times in my life. But I'm going to go back to how I developed the concept of a role model. Um, my family were really uprooted from our 3-room apartment that we lived in. And because the Black African American woman, and so this is not negative, wanted to move out of the city into a rural community. And I think she may have had property. So she needed to sell her house to do that. So all of her tenants, and she had 3 tenants. I'm not sure if she lived on the first floor or not. She may have lived on the first floor, but I was very familiar with the tenants on the second floor, and we lived on the third floor. And
This was a
so
Black woman? This was
yes, she owned that.
wow.
She owned
Wow.
that house, and she
Wow.
was going to buy another house in a rural community. And Gladys and Lucy, the women who were working in the defense industry, were her daughters.
Wow.
So a very entrepreneurial family, and they went on to be great entrepreneurs. But we had to move temporarily as we waited for our public housing home. My parents had applied. We were on the waiting list, but the community was a brand new community that we were going to move into. And interestingly enough, it was in the suburban area of Baltimore City. But we had to live in one room. And as we waited, our temporary housing was one room. My brother had to move with my Aunt Annie, who I talked about, who was a defense worker. And so in that one room was a family who knew us. So they may have made space for us, I'm not sure. But also in the family was a daughter and who was in high school. And she was very flamboyant. And so it was my joy every day to be waiting for her when she came from school to see what she had to say about how she enjoyed her day at Frederick Douglass High School. I decided in that moment, when I grew up, I was going to be like Shirley Thomas.
Okay.
And I was going to Douglass High School. So that she became my first role model. And I understood when you see something positive, follow it. So that was what became my concept of a role model. And so trying to lead into how I wrote the book or what it's about. And so that was my way I lived my life as a child, having role models, following them. And then once we moved to our public housing home, because we didn't call it projects, we called it homes. It was in a Southwest community on the outskirts of Baltimore City in Southwest Baltimore, and it was suburban. And it was named Cherry Hill.
Wow.
And so, yes, Cherry Hill. And so we were always, and it was a peninsula of Baltimore City. And so you had to either go around or cross a body of water in order to enter that peninsula. But that's where I grew up. That's where I lived until I entered college. Because it was a peninsula, when there was opportunities, many children and many families lived their life on that Southwest Peninsula. However, my family had strong links to the mainland of Baltimore City, I'll call it. And therefore, travel became a part of my life because there was a time when I actually went to school outside of the peninsula. And so there's a lot of history around the school because this was a new community, it was a new concept to develop this public housing community that would be mixed. It would not just be renters and it would not just be public housing. There would be home ownership in this community. It was quite unique. And so, and my family, I believe, were somewhat unique because they had these strong ties to the Baltimore community. Many families did not have those ties or did not pay particular attention to it. And remember, the veteran community were the primary family groups that were targeted for this community. My father, however, was not a veteran. That's why we did not know for certain if we were going to be accepted. But we were accepted. And when we got our letter of acceptance while we were living in our room, it was like George Jefferson going uptown. Yes, moving uptown. That's exactly how the experience was. And I know people may have difficulty relating to that because that's not the perception of public house. But that's how it was then. So anyway, there were times in my life, and my mother created a spirit of independence. She
Mhm.
allowed me to do things for her, maybe because she wasn't feeling like it. And one of those things was going into the mainland on public transportation alone, and then going shopping for her. Now I was 7 years old or 8 years
Wow.
old that she gave me that opportunity. Um,
Wow.
to get on the bus and go. And then shortly thereafter, I had the opportunity to. I had a teacher who thought of me like my brother. She believed that I was very smart, so she gave me the opportunity to skip a grade, a half grade, by going to summer school. And the summer
Mhm.
school was on the mainland of Baltimore
Wow.
City. I'm going to stop saying mainland and say West Baltimore. And so I had to catch the bus. Now I was in the second grade. It was
Wow.
the end. Was I in the second grade? Maybe it was the end. Yeah, I was in the second grade, and that was the summer. So I could go to the third grade in September rather than having to wait for January, because at that time we had half year grades. And so, but that experience, getting on the bus every day, going and going in order to get to West Baltimore, of course, you had to cross the body of water or go around it. There was a way we could go around it. And then we went through downtown Baltimore, and I had to pass the house that I lived in on the trolley car on my way to the school. So I always remember the house, always remember the address, and I even think it appears in the book. But what I'm saying is that it showed me that I can have a life in Cherry Hill, and then I
Mhm.
could have a life in Baltimore. And I have many relatives there. My church was there. I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist. I attended Berea Temple Church in Baltimore City, often alone. And eventually I went to the Seventh-day Adventist school, which was even a longer ride. And once out of school, I would walk with the different students throughout West Baltimore. And so, what I'm saying to you, I developed an attachment for West Baltimore uh, because of the many experiences of my childhood. Um, I once I went to high, and I guess I have to talk about this because this was the start of my own personal activism. As I
Mhm.
told you,
Mhm.
I was committed to going to Frederick Douglass High School, and integration or desegregation started was being implemented in the nation, but in Baltimore City at the end of my at the beginning of my ninth grade. And so there
Mhm.
were many opportunities for us then.
Yeah.
At the time that I committed to going to Douglass High School, there were 3 high schools for Black children in Baltimore.
Wow.
And so by the time I reached the ninth grade, there were several high schools. 54 Supreme Court decision impacted Baltimore. But Baltimore had
Mhm.
been doing some incremental things by identifying some bright young men to go to Polytechnic High School even before the 1954 decision. But
Mhm.
I just have to mention this. The school that was closest to me that I
Mhm.
would have gone to in the 10th grade had a major riot
Mm.
over integration. That was Southern High School. And
Wow.
so, of course, that was not an option for my mom. And
Mhm.
she did not insist, and she knew where I wanted to go, and she did not pressure me to do some of the things that the counselors were recommending for me. And so I
Mhm.
did go to Frederick Douglass High School. It was a glorious experience once I got through the first obstacle. So
Mhm.
I had the school that I went to in the ninth grade was a
Mhm.
newly built school in the Cherry Hill community. And I was
Mhm.
going to a school in South Baltimore. Um,
Mhm.
and I knew that after the 8th grade, I would be going to Cherry Hill Junior High School / elementary because it had so much
Mhm.
space. But in any event, I decided, because I had decided in junior high school that I was going to be a journalist. And
Wow.
because I was inspired by the advisor for the newspaper who pulled me in, another role model.
Right.
And I needed to know how to type. That's what I believe.
Mhm.
And since this school was going to have typewriters, which the school that I was in did not, and the only way I could do that was to sign up in the 9th grade for the business curriculum. So when I got to Douglas High School in the 10th grade, I was already identified as a commercial business student. And I knew that I was going to college. And that
Mhm.
was may not cut it. So I went to the counselor and said, listen, change my program. I want to be college prep. The
Right.
counselor
Right.
told me,
Get on that different track. Yes.
right,
Yeah. Mm.
you from Cherry Hill, you're not going to college.
Oh no.
So it was her idea that everyone in Cherry Hill was poor
Wow.
and they could not afford to go to college. Well, that triggered something in me big
Mhm. The activist.
because
Yes.
she didn't know about me. She didn't know about Cherry Hill. And my
Mm.
mother, who had always been an advocate for us as children, when anything happened, she was right there at the school to straighten it out. In fact, that's how
Mhm.
I ended up in Seventh-day Adventist school because the teacher had put her fingerprints in my arm.
Oh my goodness.
So my mother said,
No.
you're not going to this school another year. So she put me in something
Yeah.
else.
Oh my
So
goodness.
in any event, I'm kind of going to push it a little bit. The counselor said I couldn't transfer. My mother was hospitalized. She was having planned surgery in
Mhm.
a Catholic hospital, Mercy Hospital in Baltimore. So I
Mhm.
went and told her my story,
Mhm.
and she prepped me. She said, "You go straight to the principal's office, and
Mhm.
this is what you say." And she told me
Mhm.
exactly what to say. Now, when I left my mother's ward where she was in, on the
Mhm.
outside of it was a nursery,
Mm.
all
A
black
baby
children,
nursery?
a
Mhm.
baby's nursery for black
Yes.
babies.
Wow.
And with what she told me and what I saw, I knew it was wrong that those
Mm.
babies would be outside of the adult ward by
Mm.
themselves. And
Mhm.
so I wasn't focused so much on segregation, but I knew about harmful things happening to people as a
Mhm.
result of their color. And
Mhm.
so I knew. So I took the fervor of seeing those babies and my mother's words to the principal, and I was immediately transferred to the academic class. And so
Awesome.
that was my first act of defiance
Mhm.
and it and victory.
Yes,
So I
activism.
knew you can be
Yeah.
defiant, you act, and victory will come. I went on to Morgan, and I was able to, in spite of my split academic social life, I was accepted, and I was put in the B curriculum, and went on to pursue my aspirations of being a journalist. There at Morgan, which I always knew, I just haven't talked about it. My strength was in math. It
Okay.
definitely was not in English. I could write newspaper stories very well, but
Mhm.
I had not been able to conceptualize writing a composition. I wasn't doing well in French. And so my physical science teacher said, you don't have any business being over there anyway. And of course, that was during the time when students were really encouraged to go into the scientists because of Russian and Sputnik. And so I ended up majoring in physics as a result of that conversation. And as a result, I was actually setting the curve for freshmen in the physical science class, which was for non-science majors. So that didn't mean I was the smartest science student. It meant that for those students who were not science majors, I was setting the curve. And
Indeed.
so I did not do exceptionally well. And that had a lot to do. I still had that social agenda. But at the same time, in my sophomore year, I became pregnant with my oldest child. And
Mhm.
so trying to be social, trying to be mommy, trying to be academic, it was not easy. So by the time I reached close, I left school for a year, took a sabbatical for my daughter. I left for a year. Um, at that time, I met my future husband. We were not married at the time. At Morgan, he was from New York. He'd come down to go to Morgan. He was an art major. There was an outstanding artist that he was interested in knowing. He didn't come to Morgan first. He went somewhere else. He played football at Fayetteville. But in any event, I go on through and decided when I returned that you're not going to be able to manage this physics curriculum. You're not going to be able to go to graduate school with your responsibilities. Plus, I was not an A student in physics. And so I decided to go into continue my major, but to take a minor in education. So I would have a backup that was more compatible to being a parent. And so my first year out of college, I taught school in Baltimore City, science and mathematics. During that period of time, David, that's my, at that time, the father of my daughter, and I married, and we eventually moved to New York. So that landed me in New York, where the activism really began, because I never did anything of significance after the action at Douglas High School in my sophomore year. And
Mhm.
so my husband had convinced me to move to New York, feeling which he felt that she would have a better educational opportunity. He compared
Mhm.
my education with his education and how it result where how where we were in comparison once we were at Morgan. So
Mhm.
he had a strong argument. Uh, I decided to do that. However, once in New York and once Therese was enrolled in the New York public schools, I realized that, yeah, they may be better than the schools that I attended, the schools of Baltimore, but they're really not good enough for my daughter. And so, and I got very much involved with trying to improve the school where Therese was attending. It was in a working class community, and that probably had something to do with it. Um, and so, in that involvement as a
Mhm.
parent advocate, I I always say Therese had the impact of influencing me to become an activist because first I became a parent advocate. As a parent advocate, I
Mhm.
met Viola Plummer, who was
Mhm.
the advocate. Our children went to the same school. In fact, I tell this joke about our daughters. And let me just stop for a moment right now. We lost Viola last week.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just wanted
Yeah.
to pay
Sending love
tribute to
and
her
light.
for
Yes.
all that she has been in my life and her
Mm.
role, her significant role in my
Yeah.
life about being an activist.
Yeah. So
Um,
she's definitely part of your legacy, you know?
she's definitely a part of my legacy. And
Yes.
it was through my advocacy for Therese that I met her. In fact, Therese and her daughter, Karen, when they played games, they didn't play school, they didn't play hospital, they didn't play family, they played meetings because that was the image that they had internalized of their mothers, that their mothers went to
Oh
meetings.
my goodness.
And
That's
so
that's
that's how
awesome.
Viola Plummer. And she went on
Mm.
to become an international Pan African legend of an activist and has
Mm.
had such a major impact on. She is like one of the mothers of reparation. Her life
Yeah.
is significant. And we lived in Queens, but she uh, spent a lot of time in Harlem in her role as an activist, as well as
Mhm.
Brooklyn as an
Mhm.
activist, and around the world. She's met with
Mm.
the leaders of the the Organization of African Unity. She's
Mhm.
amazing. She's just
Wow.
amazing. So she's a great loss to her family, to her community, to the city
Mm.
of New York, and to the
Mm.
world in general.
Mm.
So I'm paying
Mm.
tribute to her in this moment.
Indeed.
You know, I left New York.
Mm.
It was a separation,
Mhm.
marital separation, and returned to
Mhm.
Baltimore and started
Mhm.
again as a parent advocate. And
Mhm.
the second woman in the book, Angela Lee, she was the parent advocate in Baltimore City. She had her own parent organization that she founded and that she led over many years. But the parent advocacy that we did put us in touch with the larger community of activists. And it was
Mhm.
through that. And I also had other cultural nationalist connections that
Mhm.
that I had in Baltimore. And so I
Mhm.
was combining the cultural nationalism, parent advocacy, and activism in general once I came to Baltimore. Um,
Mhm.
I believe that I probably made a significant contribution to the anti-apartheid movement. Prior to that, I
Mhm.
had worked through Viola introduced me, I believe, to the African liberation struggles. And eventually that led to the anti apartheid. There, I met Monkey Cola, who's in the book and was a significant leader in the African National Congress. And even before meeting Monkey Cola, I met Cecilia Bride. You know, all of the women, and I can't
They
identify
got to.
each of
They got to read the book. You're giving us the whole book.
yes, yes. I'm and I'm not. Yeah. And so all of these women have significant lives that they wrote about in the book. And I
Yeah.
also wrote about their impact in my life in the chapter on my life, but also gave a major introduction to each of their chapters. Um,
Indeed.
Pretty much, as Clara has said, that is the book. And then the
Yeah.
last part of the book is about, which I haven't talked about, it's about the feminist theory, Black feminist
Mm.
theory that I developed because when I went to look for Black feminist theory in the literature as I was writing my dissertation, there was none available. So I
Mhm.
created it, and I created it, and this is the exciting, one of the most exciting parts of the book is the third part, is that in order to create this Black feminist theory, I went back and searched the actions and the thoughts of women of African descent from the slave trade ships
Mhm.
up through the contemporary voice of Black women activists. And that's how the theory evolved. And
Mhm.
so so I've touched on my life, part one of the book. I've touched on the 16 women who are in the part two of the book. And I've touched on the evolution or the, the evolving Black feminist theory. And with that, I'm
Mhm.
going to stop and let Clara take charge of her interview.
No, this has been really, really phenomenal because there's a couple of things that I glean. One, your life is just incredibly rich, right? You have done so much and lived through so many the of the years of time, where change has happened, and changes happen for people of African descent. And your experience of that is just incredibly rich. And how you explain it in the book, because I've had an opportunity to read it, is just amazing. But I want to put a pin in some things that you said. One was the concept of mentorship. Like from a very, very early age, you were mentored, from the women who went to war and the wage, to see that women earn money. They're not just housekeepers and mothers and wives. They are contributing people to society and just developing a sense of worth as a woman, and having other women who poured into you at a very early age, and the mentorship that happened throughout time with the 16 women who are in the book, the women that you grew up with, the people in your life who you grew up with, was really amazing. The other thing that you talked about was the entrepreneurship, like to have a Black woman who owned property in the 19, what was it, 1950,
40,
1940?
1940.
Yeah, multiple properties is amazing to me, like, because home ownership was really difficult, and being in that industry and knowing the backdrop of that history, how difficult it was to get property, to keep property, um, and to be able to offer that to other people was really amazing to hear you talk about that. I love, love, love what you said about home versus project. And when we talk about housing, again, you're really speaking into my listening. We're providing, everything is not a project, it's a home, it's a place where people stay, that they're growing, that they're living, that they're having their life experience. And to be a part of a development that was incorporating um, rental housing, single family housing, like everything. There are very few developments like that today in the United States. There's some actually in Atlanta where that model is being done. They tried to do some of that model in New Jersey, and it's still, trying to get off the ground. But there are places where it exists in, which is really interesting, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. There is a development that incorporates rental, single family homes, affordable housing, in with housing that's appreciating at current market value. I'll say it that way. But they're homes for everyone, and you wouldn't know that the affordable homes are there, that people are paying what they can afford to live at the same level of quality as everyone else. So I love the way that you distinguish that, and that it existed and has existed for a while, which says that it can continue to exist, and we need more of it. So thank you for pointing that out. The other thing that really captured me that you said was about, you kept talking about crossing water, or, like going on the island. And I got this whole image of being birthed, because the baby is incubated in a sack of water, right? And the mother carries the child in the sack of water across terrain, the traveling, across the water. And then that baby gets birthed. So you have to cross through the water to be birthed into life. And I just saw you being birthed into all these different spaces. The ability to travel at 7 years old by yourself, which is difficult in these days and times to send a 7-year-old on the bus by themselves. You traveled, you crossed the water. So, like as Africans, we crossed the water to be in the United States, right? You crossed waters to move from one community to the next community, right? So you were birthed into all of these different spaces of your evolution, and taking your legacy with you as you reached out past where you were. Like you didn't stay put. And I think a lot of times people um, who haven't had the experience of travel, from going from someplace other than where they're from their city, from their state, from this country, your experience is so much broader when you go to other places and learn new things. And then you bring that back. And also how important it was for the establishment of your activism, right? Because your activism is rooted in the birthing process. Like you're birthing new ideas and people who are stuck in old ideas that are wrong, from your daughter to, what happened when you came back to Baltimore and advocating for yourself in school, like all of those things, you're birthed into this whole state of activism, standing up for yourself and for other people and for what's right. And then the last thing that really stuck with me was your establishment of lifetime friendships and relationships. Like, reading the book, you have known these people over extended periods of time. And sometimes people have folks in their lives for a season, and then, they kind of fall off and they go into the next season and go and say, but you have gleaned from these people. They've poured into you. You've birthed from the things that they've poured into you. You've been active on the things that they've poured into you, and the relationship that has developed, and the way you spoke so passionately about Miss Viola, um, and your relationship with her over time is just really, really amazing. And it's very precious and dear, because friendships and relationships are the fabric of us bringing into being our legacy, which is the title of your book. So can you share about why you named the book Bringing into Being Our Legacy?
Um, you mentioned the fact that we have a prior relationship, which
Yes.
began with the International Black Summit.
Yes.
And they had a theme of bringing into being who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it started, from bringing into being.
Mm-hmm.
Many people disagreed, but I knew the concept of what it meant. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to bring into being not just my legacy, but these 16 women, their
Yes.
legacy. And not only that, you mentioned earlier that I was inspired by my grandmother, my great
Yeah.
grandmother,
Yes.
who was a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
I consider midwifery a feminist profession. And that was part of what moves me when I thought about, because we call her Liza, and my mother would say, Liza didn't take no stuff. And so I said, I'm Liza's great granddaughter, to myself, even as a child. When I went to visit her for the first time on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, I was inspired by her
Yeah.
smile and the way she
Mhm.
looked upon me. Didn't really understand how it would all be integrated later, but I knew that my mother said she was a midwife, but she was also one who didn't take no stuff, you
Right.
know, and didn't take no stuff was an activist. You know, I don't know how it played out, but it played out in me.
Indeed,
So
indeed.
yeah.
That's really, 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 really great. You know, your great grandmother, I'm sure, poured into her, and she poured into you, and then your brother poured into you, and your mother poured into you, and these 16 phenomenal women poured into you. I really want to encourage people to get this book. I don't know. I've got my copy here. I don't know if you could see that. Bring into being. Uh, can you see that? I don't know. There it is. Bringing into being our legacy, and it has a picture of the 16 women who also inspired you. It's a great thing. So, how long was this process from the idea of conception of this book to completing the book itself? How long did it take you to bring it all together?
Um, I identify 2019, but there were some things that were happening before 2019 uh, in terms of someone asked me to write about my life in Cherry Hill prior to
Mm,
2019, and
mhm,
I did that.
mhm,
Um, Once I completed my dissertation, had my doctorate,
mhm,
I immediately became a, a, an elected official shortly thereafter. In fact, when I was asked to run for public office, I said, once I complete my dissertation. Well, once I completed my dissertation, I did run and I stayed in office for 16 years and
mhm.
then for 3 years as deputy mayor of Baltimore City. But I never went back after I wrote the dissertation and read it
Mhm.
because I knew what was in it. And I knew the thing that was in it that was very significant for me was that I had created a Black feminist theory. And I was really
Mhm.
on the peripheral of the academic community. I really didn't know what was going on because I was so much involved in the political world. And so I kept saying, you got to go back and look. So I left the political world and to some extent, personally, around 2010. And so I just kept thinking, but I would not really go back and read it. And then it occurred to me that it would be important for me to publish the Black feminist theory that came out of my dissertation. And so I
Excuse
did
me.
that in 2019 as a part of my role as a presenter at a conference. So I had that publication, um, but it was not formally publicized. And it was called The Evolution of Black Feminist Theory, a Black feminist theory. I always say
Mhm.
because I don't want to take credit for having, you know, a soul theory.
Mhm.
Um, so then I thought about my own life and how I got to the point. I thought about Liza. And then I said, but it's not just about you.
Yes, a couple of things. There's a one of the things that jumped out me. This was from the Honorable Verna Jones Rodwell, and uh, she was talking about the power of walks and talks. You know that you guys used to walk and talk, And you would always say to her, if you don't like your elected representation, run for office. You know, and that, that really stuck with me because I have friends who, people in my life who complain, and I'm always telling them, if you're not going to do something about it, don't talk about it to me. Like, you know, we're not victims of our environments. You know, we have the opportunity to shape what's going on around us, and I really
Exactly.
appreciate that about
Mhm.
you, and you know, how you've lived your life, how you've been a representative for not only your voice but the voice of other people in your city as well. So that is really, really, really powerful. And this book, you know, being into bringing into being our legacy is a very, very powerful book. It's a great read. And you know, again, I can't say enough for people to go out and get the book. I want to jump to a different, for you to put on a different hat. I'd like for you to put on your author hat and talk about, as an author, what were some of the challenges of writing and publishing the book?
Well, the major challenge is writing the book.
Mhm.
And once the book is written, is making it publishable. And so you have to engage other people in the process. Um, the book is 50% of what it was, the ultimate book that was published, page wise, is 50% less than what I'd
Wow.
written.
Wow.
It is a challenge, but I was advised by people who knew the industry that this 400-page book is not going to be published. So that meant I had to go back and rewrite.
Mhm.
The rewrite took a long time. It may have taken a year, I'm not really sure. But it is a better product. And when you employ advisors, listen to them. And if you don't agree, get someone else. But
Mm,
don't go
mhm.
out on your own. And maybe you will come to a place between the three of you, your two advisors and yourself. And I think that that is a more healthy place. So there is there's graphics that are involved, and then you have to make a decision. How much time will you pursue dealing with a traditional publishing house, or will you
Mm,
self?
mhm.
And because one of my advisors was also a publisher, um, I was able to get advice from him. And so I decided, and he was also able to direct me to many of the other advisors that I had. So I want to give a special acknowledgement to Paul Coates, who is the
Yes.
owner of Black Classic
Yeah.
Press and Black Classic Printing, digital printing. So he does have a press in its own right, and he does publish. For me, he did an extraordinary job with the printing of the book. So I hold him up as someone, when you get to the point that you've made the decision that you're going to self publish, then you cannot find a better printer who also has a press where he does his own publishing. So then I had to make a decision after I'm published, self-published. Um, where do I go from here? And I was unprepared to have large volumes of books. in my space. I didn't have that kind of space. And so I went to Amazon because I wanted my book to be available to the largest possible community. And so they did some reworking, mostly graphics, and they also expanded beyond themselves, beyond Amazon.com, where I'm published, where I'm not published, published. And I also and provided the opportunity for me to be with other publishers worldwide.
Awesome.
So the book has exposure worldwide. And so those are the kind of decisions that I have to make as an author. And even with that, beyond Amazon and beyond the other platforms where the book is, you as an author have to promote the book because the book is just there. It's up to you to convince the public that they should go to Amazon and purchase the book or go to any other platform to purchase the book. And so for the past year, I actually launched the book Women's History Month last year. And since then, I have been engaged in activities that would lead to promoting the book. That's another decision that you're going to have to make. Are you going to invest in yourself and therefore invest in the book? And some of these require a monetary investment. And so that from March 2023, when the book was launched in Baltimore, I now live in Atlanta, Georgia. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. At that time, I completed the book in Atlanta, Georgia, but Baltimore was my home. So I wanted to launch the book in Baltimore. We did quite well in terms of the people who came to the launch and purchased the books. Many purchased more than one. And so from there, I started trying to figure out how to promote, thanks to Clara. She introduced me to Melanie, and Melanie has inspired me and continues to inspire me as an author who has to promote my work. And she inspired me so much that I had to take a sabbatical. And so when I entered 2024, different than 2023, just totally emerged and getting the book to the people, because I do think that lives will be saved through the reading of the lives of other women, and all of they may be saved, not just from the 16 women, but there are other women and men in the book who have phenomenal lives. And if it's read, somebody is going to see themselves right in the moment in that book and know what they thought they were not able to do. They can transcend and do it. Someone will have a purpose where they may be stuck, and they will transcend and fulfill their vision and their purpose that may save their lives, but most importantly, save someone else's life. Well, my biggest takeaway is that I'm an ordinary woman. I'm not extraordinary. And that some of the things that I've done may be extraordinary, and they can do it too. for the academic women in particular, I want them to take away that this theory that evolved before 1988. I think it started evolving around 1985, but I know it was before 1988 because that's when the dissertation was completed. I want them to read it to see that something has been hidden that they all now have privy to, that this one woman, because she needed it for her dissertation, decided to develop a Black feminist theory. Read it and critique it. Wow. So that's the takeaway for them, to read it and to critique it and to see where it takes Black women going forward.
Awesome. And if people want to get the book, how can they get it?
Well, I'm suggesting Amazon.com to purchase the book, or eventually through my website, which is SalimaMarriott.com.
You're on sabbatical now, but what future projects do you have in the works?
Well,
and maybe you want to speak a little bit about your audio series and some other things. I know you've got some speaking engagements coming up as well.
Oh, yes, that is important because this year, and so things that were already in the works, I didn't take sabbatical from. And one of the important things that's in the works is Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore City will be featuring the book on March, I think it's still March 25th. It's the same day that we launch. It's a Monday, in case I got the dates wrong, at 7 a.m. in the Wheeler Auditorium of Enoch Pratt Library. And Pratt will be making the book available to all attendees, and we will be signing the book. So I'll be there. It will be a panel. The program that Pratt is sponsoring is a panel. I will be moderating the panel, and 4 of the women in the book will be the panelists, and they will be Therese Thompson, that's my daughter, Therese Marriott Thompson, Reverend Barbara Ann Sands, attorney Georgia Gosley, and I'm bringing the women in according to how they appear in my life. So Therese is first, Barbara Sands, so I have not talked about Reverend Barbara Sands, Georgia Gosley, and the person that Clara mentioned is former Maryland Senator Verner Jones Rodwell, who was my walking partner. So those are the 4. They will be there. They will be prepared to also sign the book, and the book will be free to the attendees that evening. Pratt has projected a certain amount. If it's more, we'll figure out what to do. So that, again,
what's the date on that again? And
Monday, March 25th, Baltimore, Maryland, Enoch Pratt Free Library, which is the state library.
Okay.
And I'm here this morning with Clara. Of course, she was my accountability partner for the past year. Yes, from the moment we launched, not from the very moment, but we became accountable to each other in an informal way. We formalized it probably a month or 2 later. And we've been at it all that time. It's been quite an experience. Monday mornings at 7:30. Yeah. Thank you, Claire, for all that you poured into me. That's why I'm here
Oh, thank you
today.
for what you Oh, I
Yeah.
so appreciate you, and I so appreciate everything that you have poured into me. And my project will be birthing. My water's getting ready to break over here. I'm just so amazed at you. You are such a phenomenal woman. I call it a Maya Angelou woman, Angelou woman, just a phenomenal woman. You've done so much in your lifetime, touched so many people, and you've shared that experience with bringing into being our legacy, a portion of that experience, because your life is so rich. There's lots of layers to it, but I think it's an important piece. Um, I think you mentioned that it's in libraries as well for people who want to read the book and aren't able to purchase it at this time. But I would say invest in this book. It will be worth your investment. And as Salima said, you'll see a part of yourself as the activist in you. You'll see the relationships and how important relationships are in your life. You'll see how we have really contributed to the fabric that is um, not only the United States of America, but of the world, and how we continue to impact, we women continue to impact everything around us by our mere existence and our being, yeah, and who we be in the world. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming today and sharing your story, for agreeing to share your story. Is there another way that you want people to contact you if they want to reach out to you directly for speaking engagements or for more information about what you're up to?
I think the website at this moment is probably going to be the most valuable way for me to be reached out to. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Awesome. So
trying to.
SalimaMarriott.com, and her name is spelt there on the screen. Her book, Bringing Into Being Our Legacy, that you can get on Amazon.com. Um, Miss Marriott, I just want to thank you again and let you know how much I love you and I appreciate
You.
you. And yes, how
It was
much
not
I
only my
love and
pleasure, it was my honor to share this hour with you.
oh, thank you. Thank you again. And for those of you who tuned in with us today, thank you, thank you, thank you. Share this information, like and share the broadcast with friends and family, and definitely get the book.